Hi everyone, this is the Gardening Guru, and what you see here is me preparing to put down some grass seed. I'm starting by raking up the leaves that I use to protect the soil over the winter. And then I'm taking a garden rake and scratching the surface of the soil to rough it up and make it better for the seeds to adhere. And I'm broadcasting the grass seed. I'm trying to make it fairly even, and I'm doing it by hand. This is a method that was used for centuries to lay down seed, scattering the seed about using organic seed, and then I'm laying down a layer of straw. It's a nice light mulch that'll keep the seeds in place, protect them. And I picked up a bag of this for $5 over at Eagle Landscaping. Didn't cost that much. And now the ground is ready. The seeds are in place, and I'm just waiting for the rain. Everything being done naturally. So good evening. You've purchased your seeds, they've arrived, you're all excited, you want to get started with your garden. So tonight we're going to talk about sowing and sprouting seeds, how you get your seeds started. Now for anyone who picked up a pumpkin patch in a pouch yesterday at the library, here's our kit. The first thing you'll notice is that we gave you a bookmark, and this bookmark is to promote Children's Book Week at the library. Our librarians in the youth department will be more than happy to help you to find books that are fun and appropriate for children. And on the back is a reading list of books about pumpkins, kids' books. So you have a bookmark. And now let's see what's in the bag. We have a Ziploc bag that has paper towel and pumpkin seeds. And we have, this was to hold the soil in place so it didn't scatter all over the bag. We have a peat pot, and it's full of potting soil. So we have a couple of different methods here of starting seeds. The first one, let's take the paper towel out of the bag, and here's our pumpkin seeds. There's about 6 of them. One way you can prepare your seeds is by putting them in water and soaking overnight. I haven't started to do that yet, but you could do that. And that's called stratifying, by the way. This is wet stratification, when you put the seeds in water and you let them start to soak and have the hulls soften up. And then another thing you can do, another method is called scarifying. If you take something like a nail file, a piece of sandpaper that's abrasive, and you take it and you scratch along the edge of the seed. This is especially good if you have hard hulled seeds. This starts to rough up the surface a little bit so that the water can penetrate. That's scarification. Now, take your paper towel, dampen it. So what we're doing here is we're using a Ziploc bag as an incubator to sprout your seeds. Here we go. We have wet paper towel. And I'm going to open it up, lay it down. I don't know if people can see here, but I'm going to take the seeds and we're going to put them on here in maybe a nice little pattern. There we go. Nice and damp. You're going to fold it up and put it in your Ziploc bag. Very simple. Seal your bag and then find, oops, yeah, we're going to get the air out. And then find a nice, warm, sunny window and let it sit there. And the seeds over time will start to sprout. And when you start to see the little tail come out, the root, that's when you can put it into potting soil. Now, there's another method you can use directly, and that is, you've got your potting soil, make a little indentation, not very far down, maybe about a knuckles length. Put the seed directly into the soil, cover it up, and now here's the beauty of peat pots. You're going to want to put this in the water and you're going to let it soak up in to the soil. And it'll soak from the bottom and it'll start to moisten the soil. Now, once your seed sprouts, if you do this method, direct sowing, the thing about peat pots is that they are made out of something natural that you can just stick into the ground and they will break down, disintegrate over time, and you don't have to take them out of the pot. So that's two different methods, direct sowing and sprouting. Now, with sprouting seeds, let's clear an area here. You can try this with different types of seeds. One of them is, I took orange seeds out of a juice orange, sprouted them in a Ziploc bag, and I wound up with a little orange tree. Once it started to grow the little taproot, I planted it in the pot. You want to make sure when you plant it that you've got the root end going down, because that's plants grow naturally down with the roots. Another method of sprouting is water sprouting for something big like an avocado pit. Now, here's one that I've got started, and it already has a little tail. I don't know if people can see that. Working with a laptop is not always the best way to have a camera, but there's like a little tail that's starting to sprout here on the bottom. And it's so simple. All you have to do is take your avocado pit and notice that there's a pointy end on top. It kind of comes up to a point, and there's a little area on the bottom that's like a little nib. And I take the toothpicks and I go like this, 3 or 4 is probably better. And you put them in like this. Just poke them right into the hull of the seed. And then put them in a cup and fill that cup up so it covers up at least half of that avocado pit. And over time, it's going to take a while, but over time it'll start to grow a nice little taproot. Once it does that, then you're going to want to take that avocado pit, keep the pit in place, and you'll grow a tree. And here we go. Here is my tree. It's in a pretty heavy pot now. See? Beautiful, huh? And once it gets to be about 8 inches tall, and it starts to grow up, this actually is a little longer than I should have let it go. But once you get about 8 inches, cut off the top. I know, it's like, oh no, I'm going to kill it, but you don't. And what happens then is it forces the energy back down into the root system and back up. The trunk will get thicker and the top will start to branch out and you'll have an avocado tree. So, okay, that's sprouting and transplanting. Now, there are other seeds that like to go through wet stratification. So when I'm planting certain seeds, I soak them overnight. One of them is asparagus seeds. Now what I have in here are asparagus berries. If people can see this. These are berries, and inside the berry is a seed. So I saved the berries after my asparagus flowered, and I will take the seeds out. I'll soak them overnight in warm water, and then I will plant them into pots until they sprout, and then I'll put them into the ground. So asparagus likes wet stratification. And another one that likes wet stratifying are morning glory seeds. So before you plant your morning glory seeds, you may want to soak those in warm water overnight also. Now I was reading that you want to wait, if you're going to plant your morning glories, you want to wait until the maple leaves are fully out. And that has to do with timing. We can talk about that for a minute. That different seeds germinate under different growing conditions. And one of those growing conditions is temperature. And another one is precipitation or rainfall. And another one is sunlight. And these are non-biological factors that affect plants and animals. So you'll see that some plants don't start poking out of the ground until a certain temperature is reached or a certain time, like your cool weather plants will come up faster, and then you wonder, okay, is this plant dead? And then next thing you know, you have some warm weather, and that plant starts to emerge. So now there's another method of stratification, and that is called cold stratification. And what you're trying to do here is to create the same kind of conditions that you would have if these seeds were starting outside. So cold stratification or dry stratification is where you'll take your seeds and you'll pop them into your freezer, and that's like if they were to winter over. Here I have some milkweed seeds, and I put those in the freezer so that they would go through the same kind of process as being outside in the winter. And I also have here, these are, get a handful of them here. These are pods that are, can we get here? Okay, these pods contain seeds of false indigo, which is a really nice local natural indigenous plant to the area. They have formed beautiful blue blossoms in the spring. They're a member of the legume family, but they're perennial. Hear that? Nice. And those also I put in the freezer. That's for the dry or cold stratification. Now I'm going to be potting these for transplanting later. And one of the things I like to do is to save stuff so that it doesn't go into the trash. I save little old pots that you might have bought plants from the corner down the street. And so I save them from year to year. And I also save things like these trays that maybe fried chicken came in or whatever. But I use these as containers for the potting, because what happens is I water from the bottom. I put water in the tray, and then that water wicks up into the soil, and then it's going to be ready to plant your seeds. Now, the reason I do that is because if you water from the top, especially if you've just planted seeds, that's going to push the seeds down into the soil, and it's going to push the soil down. So it's a much gentler method if you water from the bottom and let the water rise up. And it's easier to water over the long run when you're growing your plants, to water, let it come up. So now we have a tray, and this is ready. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to poke a little hole in each one of these with my finger. You can take a stick if you want, whatever you want to use to poke that hole. Not going to go down very far. And I'm going to take a seed and place one in here. See if I can grow me some milkweed seeds. I saved the pods and removed the seeds. And I might take some of these and try direct sowing them out into the yard. But here we're doing, okay, I think I got all of those. And then you just gently put the soil back over like that. And I'll finish this up later. So there you have it. You have Stratifying, where you scratch the surface. You have wet stratifying, where you soak the seeds. And you have dry stratifying, where you put the seeds into the freezer to imitate what happens in nature. Now, if you took these seeds in the fall and you put them outside and sprinkled them around, you wouldn't have to do any of that, because they're going to go through that natural process. But if you're going to save them in the house, this is a good method. Now, give me a second here. We talked about temperature, and some plants germinate best when they are cool weather or colder weather. And if it gets over a certain temperature, they will not germinate properly. One of those is members of the lettuce family, like this. Another one is spinach. Spinach is kind of funny that way too. Spinach does not like hot weather. New Zealand spinach, regular spinach, you need to start those earlier in the springtime, and they're a cool weather plant. Then we have direct sowing into the ground. One of the things is there are plants that if you grow them, they're what we call biannual, like hollyhocks. You plant them one year and the next year they flower and they produce their seeds. And those seeds, if you don't take the seed pods off, those seeds will drop down and they will reseed themselves, which is great because it's kind of like a perpetual machine. If you alternate years, like last year I started some hollyhocks. This year they should flower. I'll plant some more seeds from the packet, and next year those plants then will produce seeds. So hollyhocks are a good one for reseeding. Got lots of hollyhocks. I want lots of them. Okay, and another one is 4 o'clocks. 4 o'clocks are another one that is great for reseeding. And in fact, they do better once you can get them to grow. They do much better when they reseed themselves. They come back stronger with greater vigor. Now, funny little story. Many, many, many years ago, I was working down in Dearborn, and I was out for a walk on my break, and I walked by a building where some 4 o'clocks were growing up through the crack in the sidewalk. And I went over because I knew about these from when I was a little girl. Went over and I just kind of like brushed a few of them into my hand, the seeds, took them home, planted them, and I kept them going for a number of years. So your 4 o'clocks are another good one for reseeding. And forget-me-nots. Forget-me-nots are an annual, but they will reseed themselves or should reseed themselves after, every year. Okay, 4 o'clocks. And now, a lot of plants, people like to start their plants inside, and they've got grow lights, and they want to get a head start on the season, and so they grow their plants like I was doing with the milkweed, and then you're going to transplant them. But not every plant does well with transplanting. Sometimes it can hinder or damage the plants, and so you want to plant them directly into the soil. And others germinate best when you put them into the soil. And some of those, I'm going to show you now, some of those are corn. I have corn that I saved many years ago. And your beans, pumpkins. You can start inside or you can direct sow them outside. Your green beans and your peas. Marigolds, carrots, your squashes, your cantaloupes. These are all good to start outside. You could transplant some of them, but direct sowing is a good method. Actually, right now, while the oak leaves are about the size of a mouse's ear, that's what farmers go by, this is a good time to plant your corn. And I have to tell you that when you plant your corn, a couple of words of advice. First of all, don't just plant one long row of corn, because you're better off planting it in like a spiral or in a grid, because corn is self-pollinating. And when you plant it in a row, you're going to have spotty pollination for your corn. So when you plant your corn, plant it so that your stalks are going to be a little closer together and they can pollinate each other. Now, the three sisters, a lot of people have heard about the three sisters, were corn and beans and squash. And this was something that the Native Americans did. They planted those three together. So that's why I'm going to talk about these three. For your corn, if you want to stay true to type, do not plant more than one type of corn near other corn, because what's going to happen is you'll have cross-pollination and the resulting corn will not be true to type. And if you want to save your seed in the fall off of your best ear or two, you want to make sure that it's not contaminated from cross-pollination. So those are two really important things to remember about planting corn, starting your seeds, is plant them so that they congregate, and don't plant two types of corn together if you want to remain true to type. Now, the next thing is your beans and your peas. These are called legumes. And legumes are a type of plant that forms nodules on the roots. And these nodules interact with soil bacteria, and they fix nitrogen in the soil. And one of the things you can do, clover is another legume. You can get an inoculant. And some of these seed catalogs that I talked about in an earlier episode, like Johnny's Seeds, actually sell the inoculant that you can coat your seeds, and then when your peas and your beans and your clover grow, the bacterium is already there working with the roots of the plants. So that's another way of treating your seeds before you plant, is to inoculate your beans and peas, your legumes. Okay, I think I've covered quite a bit tonight on planting. So right now we are going to have a little bit of a review, and then we will say good evening. Well, the first thing to remember is that there are non-biological factors that affect your seeds and your plants. Day length can trigger for plant growth and flowering. You have to take into consideration if it's cool weather versus warm weather for seed germination. And rainfall and snowfall are governed by the phases of the moon. You always notice that it always snows or rains after the full moon. Now, for seed preparation, there's scarification, which is the scratching of the seed surface if you have a hard-hulled seed. Then stratification. The two types are the dry, where you throw your seeds in the freezer, and your moist stratification, soaking in water. And this depends on the type of seed. And then your last one, of course, is the legume inoculation for members of the bean and pea family. The Rhizobium bacterium is a good thing to get to coat your seeds. And this works with the plant to form the nodules on the roots of the plants. And then there's 3 basic ways to start your seeds. You can either sprout them in a Ziploc bag, some kind of, or you can water sprout. Those are a couple of different ways you can start. Transplanting is where you start in pots indoors, and then you can move to a permanent location. And you can actually, if you start your seeds now, you can have them growing outside. Broadcasting, trenching, and reseeding are your 3 ways of direct sowing into the ground. Broadcasting or scattering, you can form a trench and plant your seeds and cover them, or let them reseed themselves. So I hope you enjoyed this tonight, the program. Go out and start your garden, stay safe at home, and grow where you're planted.